A girl acted strangely around her dad in the clinic, avoiding eye contact and fidgeting nervously in her chair. At first, the staff thought it was typical appointment, anxiety, but when the doctor performed an ultrasound, he stared at the screen in disbelief and began to panic. The early evening air settled over Santa Rosa, a modest city nestled in Sonoma County, California. Dr. Evan Lam glanced at his watch as he hurried out of the examination room. At 52, he had established himself as a respected family physician in the suburban neighborhood, and his independent clinic, opened just a few years ago, was steadily building a patient base. Rosa, Dr. Lam called, approaching the nurse station. This was left behind by Mrs. Hernandez. He handed over a prescription eyeglass case to the nurse on duty. "I'll call her right away," Rosa replied, taking the case and placing it in the desk drawer. Dr. Lam turned to head back to his examination room. He scanned the waiting area, now mostly empty. As closing time approached, his eyes landed on a pair seated in the corner, a stocky man in a blue polo shirt and a young girl in a red hoodie. Recognition flashed across his face. "Marco," Dr. Lam called out, walking over with a warm smile. "Marco Hallen, right, I didn't know you were coming in today." Marco rose to his feet, extending his hand. "Dr. Lam, good to see you. We're neighbors, Marco. You can call me Evan outside the clinic." He turned his attention to the girl, who kept her eyes fixed on the floor. "And this must be Lucia. I don't think we've properly met before, though I've seen you around the neighborhood." Lucia barely acknowledged him with a slight nod, never lifting her gaze. "We'll be with you shortly," Dr. Lam assured them, just finishing up some paperwork. Back in his examination room, Dr. Lam settled behind his desk, organizing the charts from his previous patient. A moment later, Rosa Delgato, his nurse assistant, entered the room. She began methodically sanitizing the examination table and equipment, preparing for the next patient. Dr. Lam, Rosa said in a lowered voice, "There's something strange about that father and daughter out there." Dr. Lam looked up from his paperwork. "What do you mean?" Rosa's brow furrowed as she wiped down the ultrasound machine. "When I took the girl's vitals, her father wouldn't let her speak, not even to give her own name. He kept answering everything for her." She shook her head. "I had to keep reminding him that I needed to hear from her directly. And the girl, Lucia, she won't make eye contact." Not once Dr. Lam leaned back in his chair. "I know them, Rosa. They live just 3 houses down from me. Marco can be a bit authoritative. Some fathers are like that. I'm Mexican too." Dr. Lam, Rosa replied, "And this isn't cultural. This is something else." She paused, then shrugged. "But you know them better than I do." "Maybe it's just how their family dynamic works." She handed him the girl's chart, and Dr. Lam's eyes widened as he reviewed the listed symptoms. 14 years old with pregnancy symptoms, he murmured. Rosa nodded grimly. "That's why I'm concerned. Send them in," Dr. Lam said, straightening his white coat and composing his expression. The door opened and Marco guided Lucia into the room with a firm hand on her shoulder. The girl moved as if she were walking on eggshells, her body tense, her red hoodie hanging loosely over her frame. "Thank you for seeing us, doctor," Marco said, taking the chair beside the examination table, especially this late. "Of course," Dr. Lam replied. "What seems to be the problem?" Marco cleared his throat, looking uncomfortable. "It's not easy to say this, but my daughter is pregnant." Despite having seen it on the chart, hearing it stated so bluntly made Dr. Lam's stomach tighten. He looked at Lucia, who remained silent, staring at her, hands folded in her lap. "I see," Dr. Lam said carefully. "Lucia, how have you been feeling?" Before she could answer, Marco interjected. She's been having morning sickness, fatigue, and lately she's been complaining about abdominal pain. Dr. Lam kept his focus on Lucia. Lucia, would you prefer to answer these questions yourself? The girl gave a barely perceptible nod. And how did this pregnancy occur? Dr. Lam asked, directing his question to Lucia again. Marco answered, She has a boyfriend. We don't want to talk about him. His tone made it clear the subject was closed. Dr. Marco continued, leaning forward. We need this to stay confidential. No one can know about this. Not our neighbors, not anyone. Patient confidentiality is standard protocol. Mr. Halcon, Dr. Lam assured him, though. He found the emphasis odd. I can't discuss any patient's case with others. Good. Marco nodded. Dr. Lam turned to Lucia. I'd like to perform an ultrasound to check on the baby and determine how far along you are. Is that okay with you, Lucia? She nodded. Still not meeting his eyes. Rosa will help you onto the examination table, Dr. Lam said. Preparing the ultrasound machine, you'll need to lift your shirt just above your abdomen. Rosa gently guided Lucia to Thettable. The girl winced as she lay back. Does that hurt? Rosa asked softly. Lucia nodded. The abdominal pain has been getting worse. Marco explained from his chair. Dr. Lam applied the gel to Lucia's abdomen, noting how she flinched at his touch. He moved the transducer across her belly, watching the screen intently. What he saw made him pause. This as he began, adjusting the machine for a better view. Lucia, you appear to be approximately 28 weeks pregnant. Marco's eyes widened. That can't be right. It hasn't been that long. Dr. Liam looked at him sharply. Have you taken her to an obstetrician before? No. Marco said. This is our first doctor visit. Dr. Lam continued examining the ultrasound image. It's a girl, he said, then frowned. But I'm seeing some concerning signs. Her abdomen doesn't match typical growth patterns for 28 weeks. This suggests what we call intrauterine growth restriction, or IUGR. What does that mean? Marco asked. It means the baby isn't growing at a normal rate. This can happen due to problems with the placenta, maternal health issues, fetal conditions. Dr. Liam moved the transducer again, monitoring carefully. I'm also detecting an irregular fetal heartbeat. He turned to face Marco directly. Mr. Halcon, I strongly recommend you take Lucia to the hospital immediately. She needs specialized care that I can't provide here in my clinic. Marco's face darkened. Jose, why can't you just give her some medicine? This requires advanced monitoring and possibly intervention. Dr. Lam explained patiently. The hospital has the equipment and specialists needed to monitor the baby's development properly. They can perform Doppler studies to assess blood flow to the baby and check for any organ under development. Marco looked resistant, but Dr. Lam continued firmly. I can give you a prescription for prenatal vitamins, calcium and folic acid to help with nutrition, but that's not enough. She needs to be seen at the hospital. He wrote out the prescription and handed it to Marco. The pharmacy next door is still open. You can fill this while Nurse Rosa helps clean up. Lucia. Marco glanced hesitantly between the doctor and his daughter. She'll be fine, Doctor, Lam assured him. We'll just clean off the gel and print out the ultrasound images. She'll join you at the pharmacy in a few minutes. Marco reluctantly took the prescription and left the room, looking back at Lucia one last time before closing the door. As soon as he was gone, Rosa began gently wiping the gel from Lucia's abdomen. You're going to be okay, sweetie, she said softly. Lucia's eyes suddenly welled with tears. She kicks when she hears his voice, she whispered. I hate that she likes him." Dr. Lam and Rosa exchanged alarmed glances. The statement hung in the air, pregnant with ambiguous meaning. "Lucia," Dr. Lam said carefully, "what do you mean by that?" But Lucia had retreated back into silence. Her momentary openness vanished. Dr. Lam tried to make sense of her words. Perhaps she was upset about her pregnancy and projecting those feelings onto her father. Or maybe Marco had been angry about the pregnancy, and she was expressing resentment. "What's done is done," he said gently. "Your father brought you here because he cares about your health. Now we need to focus on making sure you and the baby are okay. That's why it's so important that you go to the hospital right away." He handed Lucia the printed ultrasound image, and she took it, her gaze fixed on the black and white picture. To her eyes, the image looked more like an abstract blur than anything recognizable. Through the glass panel in the door, Dr. Lam could see Marco returning from the pharmacy. The moment was, Lost Rosa helped Lucia sit up, and they prepared to leave. Dr. Lam watched as Marco collected his daughter, his hand firmly on her shoulder, as they exited the clinic. After Marco and Lucia left, Rosa returned to the examination room. Her face troubled as she gathered the remaining ultrasound printouts. 9 crown, she announced, looking at the watch. "That's it for today, right?" Dr. Lam nodded, still disturbed by Lucia's cryptic statement. "Yes, they were our last patients." Rosa began shutting down the ultrasound machine, her movements brisk, but her expression pensive. "That was strange, don't you think?" she finally asked the girl, hiding her pregnancy for 28 weeks. "And what she said when her father left the room." "I know," Dr. Lam agreed, leaning against his desk. "It was definitely unusual." "What do you think she meant?" Rose pressed about the baby kicking when she hears his voice and her saying she hates that the baby likes him. Dr. Lam ran a hand through his hair. "I'm assuming she must have hidden the pregnancy from her father all this time. That's why he only just brought her in. Maybe he was angry when he found out, and that's why she's expressing those feelings." Rosa wasn't convinced, but she specifically said the baby kicks when she hears her father's voice, and she doesn't like that. "Doesn't that seem odd to you? It could be teenage hormones colliding with pregnancy hormones," Dr. Lam suggested. Nodded slowly, though. Doubt lingered in her eyes. "I hope they go to the hospital like you told them to. Me too," Dr. Lam said. "That baby needs proper monitoring." They finished closing the clinic, turning off lights and locking cabinets. The other staff had already departed, leaving just the two of them to secure the building. They walked out together into the cool night air, the parking lot, nearly empty. "Have a good night, Doctor," Rosa said, heading toward her car. "You too, Rosa. See you tomorrow." Dr. Lam climbed into his sedan, the engine humming to life as he pulled out of the parking lot. His mind kept replaying the examination, searching for clues in the interaction between father and daughter. Something felt off, but he couldn't quite place it. As he turned into his neighborhood, the street lights cast long shadows on the quiet suburban street. He slowed as he approached the Halcon residence, 3 houses away from his own. Their car was parked in the driveway. They didn't go to the hospital, he muttered to himself, a flicker of concern igniting in his chest. He continued driving to his house, pulled into his driveway, and shut off the engine. Sitting in the darkness of his car, he debated with himself. Maybe they didn't understand the seriousness of the situation, the irregular heartbeat, the growth restriction. These weren't minor issues, especially for a 14-year-old mother. He should just go inside, have dinner, and call it a night. It wasn't his responsibility to chase down patients who ignored his medical advice. But Lucia's words echoed in his mind. Shekix, when she hears his voice, I hate that she likes him. With a sigh, Dr. Lam got out of his car and walked back down the street to the Halcon house. The lights were on inside, a warm glow emanating. From the windows he hesitated, then knocked firmly on the front door. After a moment the door swung open and Marco stood there, surprise flashing across his face, before he composed it into a neutral expression. Dr. Lam, is everything okay? I was just checking in, Dr. Lam said, trying to keep his tone casual. He noticed your car was here, and I was concerned since I had recommended you take Lucia to the hospital right away. Marco's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. Ah, yes, thank you for your concern. Lucia has gone to the hospital with her mother. I stayed behind to finish some work. Dr. Lam blinked, caught off guard by this information. This was the first mention of Lucia's mother being in the picture. I see, he said carefully. That's good to hear. I was worried about the baby's condition. Yes. Well, she's in good hands now, Marco said, his tone clipped. Thank you for stopping by, doctor, but it's getting late and I have work to finish. Of course, Dr. Lam nodded. Sorry to disturb you. Good night, Mr. Halcon. Good night. The door shut firmly behind him, leaving Dr. Lam standing on the porch with annoying unease in his gut. As he made his way back home, Marco's explanation played over in his mind. He could only hope it had been the truth inside his kitchen. Dr. Lam opened the refrigerator and stared at its contents. His appetite diminished by the nagging sense that something was wrong with the girl. He grabbed leftovers from the previous night's dinner chicken pasta and placed it in the microwave. He waited for his food to heat. Rosa's concerns echoed in his mind. The way Marco had controlled the conversation, answering questions meant for Lucia. The girl's reluctance to make eye contact, her cryptic comment about the baby, and now Marco's claim that Lucia had gone to the hospital with her mother. The microwave beeped, but Dr. Lam barely noticed. A realization struck him. Despite living just 3 houses away from the Halcon family for over a year, he had rarely seen Lucia or her mother outside. He knew Marco had a daughter, but their interactions had been limited to the occasional wave from the driveway, or brief exchanges at neighborhood gatherings, always with Marco alone. As for his wife, he couldn't even recall the last time he'd seen her. He took his plate to his home office, a small room with a desk computer and bookshelves lined with medical texts. Setting his dinner aside, he opened his laptop and navigated to Facebook. This probably crosses some professional boundaries, he muttered to himself, but something isn't right. He searched for Marco Halcon and quickly found his profile. Marco's privacy settings were minimal, allowing Dr. Lam to browse through his photos and information. He scrolled through the friend list, searching for someone who might be Lucia's mother, Daniela Rivera. He read aloud. The name rang faintly familiar, as if he'd heard it long ago. Her profile picture tugged at something deep in his memory. The woman's face bore a subtle resemblance to Lucia, and he was almost certain he had seen her before somewhere. In the past, he clicked on the profile, scanning through the limited information visible to the public. Daniela's page had few recent photos with Marco or Lucia. In fact, scrolling through her timeline, Dr. Lam noticed a distinct absence of family photos. For several years, there were pictures of Daniela at work, events with friends, but none with her daughter. If they're divorced, that would make sense, he mused aloud. But then why would Marco say Lucia went to the hospital with her? Dr. Lam knew he was stepping outside professional boundaries by investigating his patient's family this way, but Lucia's well-being and potentially her safety overrode his hesitation. He clicked on the messenger icon and began typing a message to Daniela. "Hello, Miss Rivera. I apologize for contacting you this way, but I'm Dr. Evan Lam, a family physician who saw your daughter Lucia today. I just wanted to check how the hospital visit is going again. Sorry for the intrusion." He hesitated before hitting send, aware that this message might anger her or cause confusion, but concern for Lucia won out, and he sent the message. Dr. Lam ate his dinner while occasionally glancing at the screen for a response. None came. He cleaned his plate, changed into more comfortable clothes, and prepared for bed, checking his phone one last time before turning in. As he lay in bed staring at the ceiling, his phone chimed with a notification. He grabbed it quickly, seeing a message from Daniela Rivera. What hospital visit? Is something wrong with the Lucia? Before he could type a response, his phone began ringing, a Facebook call from Daniela. He sat up in bed and answered. "Hello, Dr. Lam speaking. Doctor, what's going on?" Daniela's voice was tense with worry. "What do you mean about a hospital visit?" "I'm not at any hospital with Lucia." Dr. Lam's stomach sank. "Ms. Rivera saw your daughter at my clinic this evening. She was brought in by her father, Marco. She's pregnant, approximately 28 weeks along. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line." "That's impossible," Daniela whispered. "I haven't seen Lucia in almost 3 years. Marco and I have been divorced for 10 years. He has full custody, and I'm not allowed near her." Dr. Lam closed his eye, pieces beginning to fall into place. "Ms. Rivera, I need to explain the situation clearly. Lucia came to my clinic with Marco this evening. She's in the 3rd trimester of pregnancy with intrauterine growth restriction, which means the fetus isn't growing at a normal rate. This can happen due to problems with the placenta, maternal health issues, or fetal conditions." He paused to take a breath. "I also detected an irregular fetal heartbeat. I advised them to go to the hospital immediately, so specialists could perform Doppler studies and assess the baby's development. If there's organ underdevelopment, especially in the lungs and brain, there are treatments that could help before it's too late." Daniela was silent for a long moment before responding. "Oh my God," she finally said, her voice breaking. "My baby. She's only 14. How could this happen? Who did this to her?" "Marco said she has a boyfriend." Dr. Lam replied, though he was now questioning everything Marco had told him. "I don't know what to do," Daniela said, sounding overwhelmed. "I want to see her right now, but I'm not allowed anywhere near her. The restraining order." She broke off. "Please, doctor, make sure she's okay. If she's not, call the police. I don't care if Marco reports me for violating the order. This is my daughter we're talking about." "I understand," Dr. Lam assured her, "but we need to be careful. Lucia is in a delicate condition, and we don't want to trigger premature labor by causing her additional stress." "You're right," Daniela agreed, reluctantly. "What will you do?" "I'll check on her again," Dr. Liam promised, "and I'll keep you updated. For now, it's probably best if you stay where you are." After ending the call, Doctor accessed his clinic's electronic medical records from his laptop. He pulled up the ultrasound images from Lucia's examination, studying them carefully. The images confirmed his initial assessment: restricted growth, potentially compromised placental function, and concerning indications of decreased blood flow to the fetus. This meant less oxygen and fewer nutrients were reaching the baby, a situation that could rapidly deteriorate. The clock on his bedside table read 10:15 p.m. It was late for house calls, but the man had clearly lied to him while his daughter needed medical attention. Dr. Lam decided this couldn't wait until morning. By then, the man might be at work or come up with another excuse. Dr. Lam quickly changed back into street clothes and headed out of his house. The night had grown cooler, a light fog beginning to settle over the suburban neighborhood. The Halkan house stood silhouetted against the night sky, its windows still illuminated. He approached the front door with determination, prepared to confront Marco about his lie and insist that Lucia receive immediate medical care. He knocked firmly, rehearsing what he would say when Marco answered, but when the door opened, it wasn't Marco who stood in the doorway. It was Lucia. Her eyes widened slightly at the sight of him. "Dr. Lam," she whispered, glancing nervously over her shoulder. "Lucia," he said gently. "Did you go to the hospital?" She shook her head, her fingers fidgeting with the hem of her hoodie. "Lucia, I need you to tell me the truth," Dr. Lam said, keeping his voice low. "What's happening here? Why did you hide your pregnancy for so long?" Lucia opened her mouth to speak, but before she could say anything, Marco's voice boomed from inside the house. "Who's it, Lucia? Is that the delivery guy? What's taking so long?" Fear flashed across Lucia's face. "Please go," she whispered, already closing the door. "Please." Dr. Lam put his hand on the door to stop it from closing completely. "Lucia, I can help you. Let me help you." "I can't," she breathed, pushing the door shut. Dr. Lam stood on the porch torn. Technically, he had done his duty. He'd informed Marco of the risks and urged him to seek hospital care. He couldn't force them to follow his advice. But something about that house felt off, deeply wrong, and he couldn't bring himself to walk away. He had made a promise to Daniela, and that promise still held weight. As he turned to leave, the front door swung open again. This time Marco stood in the doorway, his expression dark with annoyance. "Dr. Lam," he said, voice tight. "Why do you keep coming to my house? It's late in the evening." "Mr. Halkan," Dr. Lam began, struggling to keep his tone professional. "I'm concerned about Lucia's condition. You told me she had gone to the hospital with her mother, but I've just learned that's not true." Marco's jaw tightened. "You've been checking up on me. Who I take my daughter to see is none of your business. As her physician, her health is my business," Dr. Lam countered. "The baby's condition is serious. Delaying treatment could lead to complications or worse." Marco glared at him about to respond when a light came on in the neighbor's house next door. A curtain twitched. Someone clearly watching the late-night confrontation unfolding on the porch. Marco's demeanor shifted abruptly. "Perhaps we should continue this conversation inside," he suggested, his voice suddenly conciliatory. "No need to disturb the whole neighborhood." Dr. Liam hesitated, then nodded. Marco stepped back, allowing him to enter the house. The living room was sparsely decorated with a worn couch, a coffee table, and a television mounted on the wall. Lucia sat on the edge of the couch, her hands folded in her lap, eyes fixed on the floor. "Lucia," Dr. Lam said gently, "how are you feeling?" Marco interrupted before she could answer. "She's fine, just tired. Pregnant women get tired." "Right, doctor." Dr. Lam turned to face Marco directly. "Mr. Halen, you need to understand the seriousness of the situation." The ultrasound showed intrauterine growth restriction and an irregular fetal heartbeat. These conditions require immediate medical attention, and will get that attention. Marco replied, his tone placating, but his eyes cold. First thing tomorrow morning. Why wait? Dr. Layham pressed. Why not tonight? Because it's late. Marco said, gesturing at the clock on the wall. Lucia needs rest. She's exhausted, and dragging her to an emergency room where we'll sit for hours isn't what she needs right now. The baby could be in distress, Dr. Lam argued. Every hour counts in a situation like this. Marco's expression hardened. The baby won't die overnight. Dr. Lam flinched at the callousness of the statement. Before he could respond, the doorbell rang Marco's shoulders. Relaxed slightly. That'll be the delivery I ordered dinner for us. He turned to Lucia. Wait here with the doctor, I'll get the food. As Marco walked to the door, Dr. Lam took the opportunity to move closer to Lucia. Are you okay? He asked softly. Is there something you want to tell me? Lucia glanced toward the door where her father was paying the delivery person, looking for spare changes in his pockets. Then quickly, Lucia reached into her pocket and pulled out several folded photographs. She thrust them into Dr. Lam's hand just as Marco turned back toward them. Dr. Lam discreetly slipped the photos into his jacket pocket without looking at them. Lucia leaned closer and whispered, More in bedroom. I'll help you, Dr. Lam promised, keeping his voice low. You're being very brave. Marco returned with a pizza box. What are you two talking about? Lucia was telling me she's hungry. Dr. Lam improvised smoothly. Which is good, she needs proper nutrition. See, I'm a good father. Marco said, placing the pizza on the coffee table. I make sure she eats well. He turned to Dr. Lam, his demeanor shifting from defensive to dismissive. Now, I appreciate your concern, doctor, but it's getting late. As you said yourself, pregnant women need rest. If she doesn't get proper sleep, that would be bad for the baby too, wouldn't it? Dr. Layham recognized the dismissal. Yes, rest is important, he conceded. But so is medical care, and she'll get it first thing tomorrow morning. Marco insisted. I promise, seeing no way to push further without escalating the situation. Dr. Lam reluctantly headed toward the door. I'll check in tomorrow to see how the hospital visit went. He said a clear message that he wouldn't let this drop. Of course, Marco replied, his smile not reaching his eyes. Good night, doctor. As Dr. Lam left, he glanced back through the window and saw Marco and Lucia sitting at the table, the pizza box open between them. Marco was talking, his gestures animated, while Lucia sat motionless, her eyes downcast. Once back in his house, Dr. Lam quickly pulled the photographs from his pocket. What he saw made his blood run cold. There were 4 photos each, showing Lucia in various stages of undress on what appeared to be a bed, with Marco clearly visible in the images. The photos documented abuse in graphic detail. My God! Dr. Lam whispered, his hands shaking with rage and disgust. He quickly placed the photos face down on his desk, unable to look at them any longer. Lucia's words from the clinic echoed in his mind with horrifying new context. She kicks when she hears his voice. I hate that she likes him. The truth crashed down on him like a physical weight. Marco wasn't just Lucia's father. He was the father of her baby. There was no boyfriend. There was only a predator and his victim living just 3 houses away. Dr. Lam reached for his phone and dialed 911. Emergency services, came the dispatcher's voice. What's your emergency? I need to report child abuse and endangerment, Dr. Lam said, his voice steady, despite the turmoil inside him. A 14-year-old girl who is 28 weeks pregnant. The father is the abuser, and the girl and her unborn child need immediate medical attention. While waiting for the police to arrive, Dr. Lam's mind raced. The photos in his possession were damning, evidence, but he needed to ensure they reached the proper authorities. He also needed to alert Daniela to what was happening. He took photos of the printed photographs with his phone, making sure the images were clear enough to serve as evidence if the originals were somehow lost or destroyed. Then he sent them to Daniela through Facebook Messenger, along with a brief message explaining that he had contacted the police and they were on their way to Marco's house. His phone rang almost immediately, Daniela calling back. "I'm coming there right now," she said, her voice raw with emotion. "That monster, I'll kill him myself, Daniela. Please let the police handle this," Dr. Lam urged. "They're on their way. The most important thing right now is getting Lucia safely out of that house and to a hospital." "How could this happen?" Daniela sobbed. "How could he do this to his own daughter? I knew something was wrong when he fought so hard for custody, but I never imagined. I never thought he would." "I'm so sorry," Dr. Lam said, at a loss for more comforting words. But Lucia reached out for help tonight. She was incredibly brave, and now we can get her away from him. "I'm still coming," Daniela insisted. "I need to be there for my daughter." "Of course," Dr. Lam agreed. "Just please let the police do their job first." After hanging up, Dr. Lam paced his living room, checking the window every few minutes for signs of police arrival. It felt like hours, though his clock told him only 20 minutes had passed since his call. Finally, he saw the flashing lights of police, cruisers turning onto their street, moving slowly without sirens, a tactical approach to avoid alerting. Marco, Dr. Lam, hurried outside to meet them. 3 police cars parked a short distance from the Halkan house. 6 officers emerged and Dr. Lam approached. The one who appeared to be in charge, Dr. Evan Lam. He introduced himself. "I made the call." The officer nodded. "Detective Morales, you have evidence of sexual abuse." Dr. Lam handed over the photographs. "These were given to me by the victim less than an hour ago. She indicated there are more in the house." Detective Morales examined the photos, his expression hardening. "And the girl is pregnant. Yes, 28 weeks. There are serious medical concerns for both her and the baby. She needs hospital care immediately." Another officer approached. "The house is quiet. Detective lights still on inside." "All right," Detective Morales said, handing the photos to another officer who placed them in an evidence bag. "Dr. Lam, please. Wait here, we'll approach the house." The officers moved toward the Halkanen residence. Positioning themselves strategically around the property, Detective Morales and another officer went to the front door, while the others covered potential escape routes. Dr. Lam watched as Detective Morales knocked firmly on the door. No response. Knocked again, louder this time, announcing police presence. Still nothing. The officers exchanged glances. Detective Morales spoke into his radio in moments.